Hi, everyone. My name is Karunya Ramamurthy. I'm one of your fellow students in ESIO 1, and today my presentation is about bycatch in shrimp trawling. So before I get into the actual information, I quickly wanted to cover why I chose this topic. Earlier this year, I watched a documentary on Netflix called Seaspiracy, which I highly recommend to everyone. And the documentary was basically about the negative effects of the fishing industry on the environment and on Earth. In the documentary, they also talked about trawling. And so I wanted to take it a step further and dive into the specifics of shrimp trawling, and in particular, the bycatch associated with shrimp trawling. Also, to give you guys just a quick overview of what this presentation is about, I'm going to discuss what shrimp trawling and bycatch are, the environmental effects of shrimp trawling, as well as how we can combat the issue. Okay, so what is shrimp trawling? Shrimp trawling is essentially a fishing method used by commercial shrimp fisheries to maximize the amount of shrimp caught. In terms of the actual trawling process, a shipping vessel releases a trawling net, which is what you see here, and they can average around 50 feet wide. These nets sink to the seafloor as they're weighted, and they drag across the seafloor, catching everything and anything that comes in its path. Unfortunately, this fishing practice is unsustainable, and I will go over the reasons why, but this is caused by the fishery's main goal of catching as many shrimp as possible. And this is done without really thinking about any of the effects on the environment. And this ideology is also what leads to the excessive amount of bycatch. So before I get into what bycatch is, I wanted to give you guys a quick little video, or I wanted to show you guys a quick little video that shows how the trawling nets actually work on the fishing vessels. So as you can see, the net has been released and it slowly sinks down because it is weighted, and you guys can see the weight attached there. And what happens is that as the fishing vessel moves, the trawl net also moves. And if you guys notice, the seafloor is actually being scraped as the trawl net moves. And this is also an idea that I will be visiting later. But as you can see, the trawl net is huge. It moves along the seafloor and it collects the fish as it moves along. Bycatch is the result of the unsustainability of trawling, and it refers to the organisms that are caught in the trawling nets unintentionally. So in this specific example, if the fisheries are trying to catch shrimp, if they caught a fish, that fish would be considered bycatch. The issue at hand is that there's such a high amount of bycatch in the net compared to the actual profitable species. And this brings in the idea of trawl inefficiency, which calculates the amount of bycatch versus the target species, and target species being the species that is profitable. Typically, almost less than 20% of the organisms caught in the trawling nets are shrimp, and the rest are actually bycatch. And so you may be wondering why the living bycatch can't be thrown back into the ocean. It's almost an idea of, if I caught a fish, why can't I release it? But because of the stress that the fish go through while being caught in those trawling nets, they actually have extremely high mortality rates. And that being said, almost 99% of bycatch is thrown back into the ocean. And so it doesn't matter if the fish is dead or not, or if the organisms are dead or not, 99% of all bycatch is thrown back into the ocean. And this actually contaminates the ocean much more. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of environmental issues that are looked over that are a cause of shrimp trawling. And so these include a decline in species diversity, destruction of the seafloor, the food web and ecosystem being thrown off. And yeah, those are just some of the main issues. As we now know, have as we now know, having species diversity is a crucial part of every ecosystem. So what happens in shrimp trawls is that larger fish have more muscle and energy, and so they're able to escape from the nets. But the smaller and weaker fish aren't able to do the same, and so they're actually more likely to die from the trawl nets due to the increase of stress induced by the net and being caught in the net. As the rate of mortality of the small fish increases, and it is important to note that the small fish is considered an essential food source, the larger organisms will turn to the shrimp that the fisheries want to catch as a food source. And because of that, that means that the fisheries are going to have more stress on their stock, which means that they're going to fish more and more often just to meet with their quota. Another environmental issue of shrimp trawling is its effect on the seafloor. Since shrimp live on the seafloor, the trawling nets are designed to maximize contact with that seafloor. And so this includes everything having an increased contact on the seafloor. So benthic is an adjective that is used to describe something as being part of the seafloor or of the seafloor. And based off of studies conducted to determine the effect of shrimp trawling on different benthic habitats, scientists deduced that seafloors with shells and rubbles are the most likely to have a huger impact by trawling nets. And so in the photo, you can actually see a benthic habitat with shells and rubble before and after trawling nets. And as you can see, the trawling nets have a huge impact because that habitat is left completely barren. Moving along, shrimp trawling also has a huge negative impact on the food web and ecosystem. So since shrimp fisheries consume so many of the organisms present in a habitat, and this can be both in the form of a target species and bycatch, a shift occurs in that habitat. And so once the population of the organisms in that area begin to decline, only a few other species of fish, such as the lizardfish and silver sea trout, can inhabit and live in the conditions of those trawled areas. And so if you want a reference of the trawled areas, that would be like image B. And so yeah, there's only a couple of species that can live in that sort of a habitat, and this leads to a lack of biodiversity. The image here is of a silver sea trout. Now, in terms of solutions, there has always been a debate about the ethics surrounding the fishing industry, and there are always people trying to figure out how to make fishing more sustainable. But just in terms of shrimp fisheries, due to the exploitative nature of shrimp fisheries, shrimp trawling is unethical, and it clearly causes so many issues in our oceans. However, considering that the industry is so large, I think that the next step in bettering the situation is finding a solution for how to reduce bycatch. Right now, there are some devices such as TEDs or turtle excluder device, and it's essentially a set of bars that are placed in the net to prevent larger organisms from passing through to the bottom. And this obviously helps reduce bycatch. However, adding any sort of device to a net or making any sort of changes in general does cost money, hence why so many fisheries haven't changed their way of doing things. However, I believe that if governments enforce laws upon shrimp fisheries to add the modifications, or if they use economic incentives when dealing with the shrimp fisheries, we can definitely reduce the amount of bycatch overall. So this is a quick little recap of my presentation. Feel free to pause. And yeah, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. These are my citations.